On Sunday the 24th of November, we're going to celebrate the life, the work, the achievements of one of the greatest composers who've ever lived, Giuseppe Verdi, who was born 200 years ago. We could have decided to do yet another performance of his wonderful Requiem. We could have decided to do a performance of La Traviata, Aida, one of his most famous operas. But I think that would be lazy. That wouldn't really feature the weight of legacy that he has left us. He, after all, is the composer who has in front of the public more operas than any other composer who's ever lived. At least a dozen of his 26 operas are always being performed. So we thought we'd do something a little different, and we thought we'd tell a story. We thought we'd find the relationship that built at the end of his life between him and Arrigo Boito, his last and greatest librettist. This is a story worth telling because they didn't know each other. They were from very different backgrounds, very different generations. And Verdi was old and crabby, and he wasn't sure that he really wanted to write any more operas. But through the intercession of Ricordi, the publisher, these two men were brought together. And Verdi quickly realized that Boito was an extraordinary man, a poet of very great distinction, a man of letters, and indeed a musician himself. And so inch by inch, these great libretti were written and these operas came to life. The first time I ever conducted an opera was one of his greatest operas, Rigoletto. And as the years have gone by, I have come to value him more than any other Italian composer, great as some of the others are. And I think the reason for this lies in his ability to take a scene or a whole act of a libretto and make it human, touching, vivid, relevant in all its glory. And he did this through experience, through talent, of course, but above all through melody. And his operas, even right to the end of his life, when he was an old man in his 70s, have great, memorable melodies. And we want to celebrate that, as well as his ability to write fiery, passionate, impulsive dramas. We're going to concentrate on the revised Simon Boccanegra, the last great tragedy, Otello, and his great comedy, Falstaff. We're going to play substantial extracts from each of those last three pieces. But that's not all. In order to tell this story fully and in an original way, the events of the day are going to start with a prologue at 3 o'clock. The orchestra will introduce the idea of Verdi's music by playing an overture to one of his earliest operas, a work that is scarcely ever played, which I've had the fortune to conduct myself, and the overture is a brilliant example of the sort of music that made Verdi immensely popular. But then we're going to tell the story of how Boito and Verdi came to be introduced, how their nervous start eventually flourished into this great collaboration. My friend, the scholar, Jonathan Keats, and I will be there on stage to take you through the events that led up to the first night of the new Boccanegra and then the new Otello. We've got some great singers coming to Manchester. The role of Boccanegra, it's going to be sung by Scott Hendricks, the American baritone, who has a voice just right for this music. He'll also sing Ford in Falstaff and Iago in Otello. The soprano, who will sing Desdemona and Amelia in Boccanegra, is the Italian soprano Maria Luigia Borsi, who has sung once before with the Halle in the Bridgewater Hall. And it seemed to me she was exactly the right person we need for this sort of music. The role of Otello is always a challenge for a tenor. They all dreamed one day being able to grow into it. And one of the most exciting aspects, I think, of this concert is the fact that England has a new Otello, and this will be his first outing in any of this music. Peter Orty has sung many of the roles that you need to sing in order to prepare for Otello. And I think his voice, of course, is younger and fresher than a seasoned Otello, as Placido Domingo used to be. But it's very exciting for us to introduce a new English Otello at this concert. We shall be rehearsing, of course, through the week beforehand. But as we've sometimes done here at the Bridgewater Hall, we're going to make the last rehearsal the day before, on the Saturday afternoon, an open rehearsal. You see, it helps us, the artists, to prepare for a performance by having the last rehearsal nearly like a performance. And we hope very much that people who have tickets for the events on the Sunday will be able to come, free of charge of course, to share in witnessing how we put all this together. This of course is part of the point of the day. What we want to show is how Verdi put these operas together, how Boito provided him with the sort of poetry, the sort of drama that made him respond and give some of his greatest music. So the idea of watching us watching Verdi is the point. And I think his craft, as well as his art, is one of his most extraordinary qualities. He was such an interesting, unbelievably demanding man. Difficult to make friends with, but once you were, he was loyal forever. But he was very unlike the sort of devil-may-care, rather ill-disciplined, happy-go-lucky Italian normal temperament. That would be a cliché. Verdi was a disciplinarian. He was extremely rigorous. It's the most wonderful, ironic detail of his life that he was born in a tiny hamlet called Le Roncole, which means a roncola is a pruning iron. And that's what he did all his life in his music. In his operas, he was always pruning it back, shorter, less, more concentration, more intensity. So the man from Le Roncole is going to be a real feature of this weekend at the end of this month. And I hope that anybody who thinks they love opera, particularly Italian opera, will realise that this is an event not to be missed.